there. When you get up closer, it looks like this. And these photographs are both from Ken Himes and Tony Corelli. You've got the owl's clover, that's this pink flower here in the lower corner, and then also the gold fields. Now you can understand why they're called gold fields, because they often fill up a field with this gold color. So Edgewood also has a Friends Of group, the Friends of Edgewood, and they lead docent hikes, and those hikes are usually from mid-March to early June, every Saturday and every Sunday. They start at 10 and they go to about 1 o'clock. You don't need reservations. As long as your group is less than 10 people, you can just show up. There often are more than one hike leaving from a different location on that Saturday and Sunday. So there's lots of opportunities to go hiking there and see these flowers and learn more about the flowers while you're there from the docents. Also, something really exciting has just happened there. The Bill and Jean Lane Education Center just opened, and it's remarkable for such a preserve, a small preserve, to have an education center there like that. And it's because of the generosity of the Lanes and other people. That education center not only tells the story about Serpentine Rock and the wildflowers are there, and Edgewood being saved from becoming a golf course. Golf course? Can you see it? But also the story of the checker spot butterfly. Remember I mentioned that Coyote Ridge is one of the few remaining locations of the endangered checker spot butterfly? Checker spot butterflies used to be here, but for various reasons they haven't been. There's now a program to reintroduce it to this location, so that's another exciting thing that's happening there. So again, if you're going to go on one hike, I strongly urge you to go to Edgewood. And there's more information about Edgewood County Park in the lobby, so I won't go any further on it, but there's a lot to do there. But moving further north, let's go all the way up the peninsula to San Bruno Mountain. So San Bruno Mountain is a biological island surrounded by San Francisco and other cities. And what also is unusual about it is that it's an east-west trending mountain instead of the north-south trending mountain ranges that we mostly have in the peninsula here. It has very steep slopes and a lot of niches there, so you get a lot of habitat. You know, you go down a trail and in half an hour you're cold, you're hot, you're in grassland with these beautiful flowers, and then you're in flowering chaparral shrubs, so there's a lot of variety there. It does get a lot of fog from San Francisco Bay and from the Pacific Ocean. It's also a really good place to go see migrating birds. So you can see San Francisco in the distance there. And then when you get up close and intimate, this is the type of variety you can see. You can see wildflower fields with Indian paintbrush in the checker mallow as up here on the top. This trail on the right is Blue Blossom Trail, and there are blue blossoms shrubs blooming purple on one side of the trail, and then it's open grassland on the other side. And not only is it uniquely surrounded by urbanization, but it provides habitat for 14 species, 14 rare or endangered plant species, and there are several species of rare butterflies that live up there. And this is the San Bruno Mountain manzanita that only grows on San Bruno Mountain. So we have lots of different types of manzanita. This particular one only grows on San Bruno. So that is a great place to go. While we're north, let's talk about the redwood forest shortly. You probably don't think about going out and seeing carpets of flowers in redwood forests, and you won't see carpets of flowers in redwood forests. But there is a time in the year, usually January, February, and March, where there is some flowering going on in the redwood understory. So if you're anxious to get started on your spring wildflowers, go start in the redwood forest. HUDDART County Park and THORNEWOOD Open Space Preserve are both mostly redwood forests, and they're in the Woodside area. And this is fetid adder's tongue, which blooms in the understory, a pretty interesting plant. You'll also see hound's tongue there, Indian warrior, and then of course usually there's beautiful stream areas. So think about redwood forests early in the spring. So let's move down the peninsula a little bit. So the ridge top of the Santa Cruz Mountains usually has thin soils, again, poor soils, and there's often good wildflower blooms in the grasslands that are up there on the top. And this is Russian Ridge Open Space Preserve. It's about 35 minutes above Palo Alto, near Page Mill Road, and it is one of the best wildflower blooming areas up there. Some of the best trails to take are the Bay Ridge Trail. That can go to Burrell Hill, where on a clear day you can actually see the peaks of the Sierras. People don't believe me, but I've seen it. Anybody else here seen the peaks of the Sierras from Burrell Hill? Okay, there you go. It's got to be a really clear day, though. And then also Hawk Ridge Trail is pretty good. And this is here to remind me to talk about grasses versus wildflowers. So every year, as it's been raining all winter in this part of California, and then it starts to warm up, and then this grand battle starts between the wildflowers and the grasses. And who wins means how many flowers you're going to get. So you can see these grasses in this photo are starting to overtop the tidy tips. So generally what happens is they're growing at about an even rate. When you get springs like we're having right now, where you get rain and then it stops, and then you get rain and then it stops, if it's rain and then it gets warm very quickly, the grasses shoot up and they grow over the top of the wildflower plants before they get very big, and they shade them out, and you don't get a very good wildflower bloom. If it's a more moderate change in temperature, you tend to have more flowers. So that's just how it is, and that, every year can be a little bit different. And this year, if it warms up this week, the grass is really going to grow. But you still get a very nice wildflower bloom up there. The Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District does manage those grasslands. One of the things that we do up there is a prescribed burn. We primarily do that to burn off some of the dead thatch from the European annual grasses. And when you do, you get a better wildflower bloom the next year. Like this. Is this gorgeous? Now, I can't promise you that every time you go out and see these sites, you're going to get gorgeous photographs like this. It's not like that all the time. But this is what it looked like on Russian Ridge last May. And that's because the previous summer we did a prescribed burn up there, and then we had really good rains that winter. I'm not responsible for the rains, but when you have a good combination, you can all of a sudden get a flush of wildflowers like this. So if you like seeing this, be a fire follower. Some people are ambulance chasers. I'm a fire follower. So whether it's a prescribed burn or it's a wildfire, often the next spring you'll have a very nice wildflower bloom. So I'm sorry, Bambi, but fires aren't all bad. Let's see, did I mention what flowers we had here? So these are the tidy tips with the yellow center and then the white tips. That's why they're called tidy tips. And the name of this plant is the Spring Elegant Matica. And it was just hills of it up there last summer. But let me mention some places. So up at Russian Ridge, it's about 3 weeks behind where it usually would be this time of year. We've had a very, very cool spring, so everything's slowed down. Right now up there are tens of thousands of Johnny Jump Ups. Those are those yellow violets. They're just all over. If the spring progresses along slowly, then you'll have a greater variety of the wildflowers. But this is what Ranger Dennis Danielson told me. He reported to me from his hike along the Bay Ridge and Ancient Oaks Trail just last week. He says there are lots of flowers, but I think it has not yet peaked. Many buttercups, storkbills, fiddlenecks, some popcorn flower, some lupin, some blue-eye grass, owl's clover, a few poppies, a few checker blooms, and a plant he calls ranger buttons. Does anybody know what that is? I figured it out. It's purple sanicle. He calls it ranger buttons.
Well, there is a ranger buttons.
Is that a different plant?
Yeah, it's a huge one.
Okay. So that's when you use common names, people can mean different things. He also mentions that In the Ancient Oaks Cutoff Trail, right now there's still some hound's tongue that are blooming, and milkmaids, and some giant trilliums. Those last three are usually late winter flowers because we've had such a cool spring. This last few weeks have been really unusual. You can see the spring wildflowers in the grassland, and you can walk into the shaded areas and still see these early spring, these January, February, March flowers still blooming. And you can see them at the same time. And most years you don't get to see that. And then the rest of what the ranger said, he says, I think another week or two of sunny and warm, but not too hot weather, and things will peak usually mid-April to mid-May. I generally think of the peak when the mule ears and the Clark ear are blooming. So it should be pretty good up there in the next few weeks. And a lot of the other skyline parks up there should be very nice too. Another park up there is Montebello Open Space Preserve. There's a small corner of it that people don't know about. It's sort of on the back side off of Montebello Road. And there's a 2-mile loop on Waterwheel Creek Trail. It dances in between shady forest edges and then open grassy areas. And then you get a lot of variety of plants there. I did talk to somebody who was up there recently, Diane Westbrook, who leads hikes and actually teaches natural history. And this is what she said for her hike, which was about a week and a half ago. Still surprisingly sparse for flowers there for this time of year. Too cold for too long, I suspect. Some lovely banks of silverbush lupin, tomcat clover, modest chia, sparse owl's clover. I feel like I'm talking a different language here. Abundant fritillaria nurse leaves, but few flower stems. And one other thing she said is that it has an appalling number of ticks. So this is not just Waterwheel Creek this year. There are a lot of ticks this year. And again, it just has to do with the weather. So just a hint, when you are out enjoying the flowers, do look down, every 15 minutes or so, and do this. If you keep brushing them off of you, then you won't get them on you. But they're out there in the grasslands too. If you really don't like them, then stay in the middle of the trail. They tend to hang off of the edges of the grasses. So if you don't walk into the grass, you're much less likely to get them. But just had to warn you about that. Now, as Diane mentioned, that the Waterwheel Creek Trail doesn't seem like it's that good this year. I've been there years where there were royal larkspur along it and all kinds of variety. And this is a reminder to tell me, to recommend to you is don't expect Mother Nature always to be the same. Respect the variability that nature has. Some years will be good, some years will not be so good. Even from week to week, you can get some changes out there. So if you have a favorite hike, go on it. If it's not good, then go in another 2 weeks, and you might have some more flowers. Or it may just be a year that you don't get these fields of flowers, and that's okay. You can't put out that much seed every year, right? So do respect that. I do get phone calls on my job, and I got a phone call 2 weeks ago from an engineer who wanted to know the exact weekday that Russian Ridge would be at its peak. So we talked about that. But there are other things to do. If you go out to Waterwheel Creek and it's not a great wildflower year that year, there will be some flowers there. Take the time to look at things closely. Jack took a picture of this Clarkia. Sometimes that's really worth looking at, slowing down and looking at things closely. Or there might be other things. Montebello Open Space Preserve also has a shorter trail, Stevens Creek Nature Trail, which is a good place to take kids. And there's a lot of creeks and ferns and newts and water there. So you can, if you don't have a good flowers, there's usually something else to see out there. Okay, so let's move out to the coast.